Hello, Smars here, and welcome to the video commentary for Myth of Eustro, Chapter 3, Forked Path. So, I guess we could talk about the cover really quickly. I think this was the first animated GIF cover that I did. I believe it was. But it had to be something simple for the file size. Downloading the actual file of the comic, I needed the cover to be simple enough, and it's really just a couple of elements all pieced together. I built them in Photoshop and then just imported them into Flash and put a couple of layers down, and then just moved the falling gnomes really are just moving around. They're just sliding. It's just a couple of frames of them sliding. It's okay. Honestly, it was originally, it was conceptualized to be a lot like, there's a later cover where Ramona is punching a gnome and he's spinning, and they were supposed to be doing that. Originally, they were going to be spinning while falling, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's going to be really tough to do. At least in the beginning, I had no idea what I was going to do with this. So with this, so I just kind of went with something simpler, easier to execute on. Um, Honestly, I need to do more recaps, mostly because they're fun to draw, and like this one with the tiny little versions of the characters, and then the little pop-ups. But also, because of the amount of time between chapters, it's too much. And honestly, and most people, I assume, they're already reading dozens and dozens of other things, other comics, and there's just going to be too much time, and it's going to be too hard to sort of retain the little bit of information that's given in these stories. So I need to do more of these, but I honestly haven't done one since this chapter, but I liked it. It was fun. Okay, so first real page. Um, this is the first chapter with the new format, and I went this way due to the time constraints, and I have a day job, which is actually at night, but it leaves me a lot less, just fewer days than I used to have to work on these. And Eustro was supposed to be bi-weekly, but then I got the day job after like 2 years unemployed and trying to figure out how to make a living doing this kind of stuff, and it just sort of took over. But I really enjoy things like with the new format. I really enjoy things like the sort of sprawling panoramic nature of that bottom panel, and I had to sort of retrain myself to pull back from the action and show more elements of scale. And I guess I don't really like drawing tiny little people and tiny details. So over time, I just sort of stopped doing it, and I started doing more closely cropped shots. And honestly, it's I think the way that I coped with it was I just told myself, oh, it's like a film director, you know, everyone has a signature style. And I guess mine would be more like quick cuts and close-ups of moments and reactions. I mean, I like that kind of stuff, but it's good to have establishing shots, and really good establishing shots can be like a good pulled back, nice panoramic image. So, speaking of reaction shots, I definitely wanted to make these. I wanted to sort of get across the grossness of these tentacles. I mean, I needed these to. I wanted them to be very ivy like plants, sort of like a Venus flytrap, with ivy tendrils that sort of reach out and grab you and pull you into that Venus flytrap maw that's underneath the archine, which I didn't focus on a lot. I didn't really show it, so you don't get a sense of it in that last panel that's where that is. You don't really, and that's another thing. Always, it kind of goes back to establishing shots. There should have been a shot that established exactly, the location of all these elements if they were going to come into play. And I didn't think about that when I was laying out this page in the thumbnails. It's unfortunate, but whatever. It's too late now. But I definitely remember looking at a lot of pictures of like Manowar, those jellyfish, and just looking at their just crazy intertwining, dangling tentacles that they have, and how they just float along, and just all these things get caught up in them, and all these little fish and things, and they're getting shocked to death, and they're just laying there just dead in them, and it's so weird. And then they sort of slowly curl up and hoist them up into their mouth, and it's brutal, but interesting. Kind of creepy, but still interesting. So with page 3, I went back and forth on the stranger, adding those little venom spike like things to the boomerang sword. Um, mm, it was honestly saying that out loud really it really feels kind of silly saying boomerang sword out loud, but yeah, still. I definitely wanted to begin establishing the idea that all those pockets that she has lining her cape are magical and possibly filled with lots of things in them, lots of items, lots of stuff. And that sort of becomes an ongoing thing. Um, yeah, the Pula Tai pen. Yeah. So page 4. Uh, this is my favorite page of the whole comic, and it's so kinetic, and for multiple reasons, and I love sort of playing with weight. I probably mention this a lot in commentaries and just in general when talking and recording myself talking, but I like weight, and it was definitely something I learned to play with more when took when I went to school for animation, and I can't. That was one of the things that I took away from that experience was weight. Uh, but I love how there's just this ton of force behind her throw when she initially throws the boomerang out, and just that exaggerated form of the character. That was fun. I'm a little tickled by how well it came out, because I was really scared that it was going to look ugly. Um, Mostly because a lot of times with my thumbnails, there's a lot of energy that goes into the thumbnails, and so the thumbnail tends to be the best depiction of like kinetic energy, movement. And I have a hard time replicating the look of the thumbnail in the final art. And so I was really worried that they wouldn't look similar, because the thumbnails had a level of energy to them that I didn't think it was going to happen, and it did. So I'm a little unhappy with that. But I'm also happy with that sort of slip and fall that the Archine does when it gets tripped up by the boomerang sword passing under it, and it knocks it forward and smashes its face into the ground below, sort of exposing its soft underside. It's that mid boss weak point. But I do want to comment on the stylistic choices of some body parts not being anchored, like the elves, like the elf woman's ears, or even the Archine's legs not being attached to the joints. Um, I've always loved cartooning, and not really taking myself seriously in my artwork, and there's plenty of time for that in the story. I mean, honestly, plenty of time for seriousness. Um, but being able to depict things that being able to depict things in this cartoonish, silly sort of way is just really fun for me, and what to draw, and it's a creative exercise, and I honestly assume that it's fun for people to see this sort of visual dichotomy, between like serious story or serious-ish story and really cartoony visuals. And I think it's a good harmony, and I've always worked this way. I've always drawn really, really cartoony and silly looking, and I've always done fairly serious stories. I've tried to do comedic stories before, but I always gravitate right back to serious stories. And it's probably because I was very early on exposed to very serious comics. I some of the first comics I ever read were the G.I. Joe comics by Larry Hama, which are very deadly serious. But I read those in like third and fourth grade. Um, so yeah, you know, exposed to those. But I I think a lot of people honestly are shocked initially because of this approach to, they approach my work thinking it's going to be comedy based, but then they see it's a serious-ish type of story, and they either get turned off, or they're intrigued by why I would go down this path. And that's sort of an explanation as to why. It's just sort of what I was exposed to early on. I was exposed to, I definitely remember early on being attracted to the visual style of comics like Gru, The Wanderer, by Sergio Aragones. I think it's how you pronounce his name. Aragones. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've never met the fellow, but that was one of the first things I remember seeing and going, "Oh, I love this. I love the way this looks." But then I didn't read it till much, much later. And like I said, some of the earliest stuff that I read were like serious war stories by like Larry Hama. Well, serious to a degree. I mean, we're talking about G.I. Joe comics. They are serious, but sort of serious in that absurdist sort of Kojima-esque Metal Gear style, Um, where it's like a fantasy military. um, but I don't know. I honestly, yeah, that's probably to a degree the origins of that. But I've only ever drawn cartoony, but the stories they come out of my head never they're never comedy based, and I've come to live with it. I'm okay with it. I like it. It's fun for me, and I'm hoping that it's fun for everyone else when people when like well you when you come to my work and you look at it and you read it, and I hope you can sort of be entertained by that weird sort of, like I was saying, dichotomy. Um, Page what's that 5? Um, that slice is kind of brutal, and it's that bug guts gross kind of thing, and it's on purpose. I wanted it to. Um, there were a couple of things at play here. One, the Archine. It is a crustacean based Archine. It's either chitinous or crustacean. There are two different types. No, you know what? It's chitinous. It's chitinous base, which is chitinous, which is like an arachnid. It's like insects. It's like a bug. It has an exoskeleton, um, and well, I guess like a crustacean, but in terms of an archine, there is a difference between that because this one is more like an insect and less like well, that's actually kind of a stupid statement. I was going to say unless like a crab because crabs, lobsters, shrimp are well by nature, crustaceans, just hyper evolved insects. Sorry if you like those kinds of foods, but they are bugs. So, anyways, but I wanted the sort of that grossness and that guts kind of thing to sort of be conveyed in that motion. I'm really just loving just the way the background is moving really really fast, but the image in the foreground is just it's this static image, and I think it helps create this sense of movement. I was really happy with it when it came out. Um, I I like the little bits and pieces of the tentacle that got ripped away by the boomerang sword. I call them flobber worms, but that's an actual thing in the Harry Potter series, and these are actually visually they're more and you'll see them. They come up well. You can see them when they're sort of the bits and pieces are all around Ramona, but they were a little bit inspired by the visual of the ghost flames um, that sort of look like snake worms in Princess Mononoke. Yeah, they're spirit flames, and they consume your entire body and become sort of a living thing in that sort of Buddhist inspired, the Buddhist inspired culture of Japan. You know, a thing by name is not exact in physical nature. So fire is not fire, but it still consumes you altogether. And so they look like sort of worms and snakes, and they sort of react and are living but not living. They are an extension of the thing that they are consuming. Um, but yeah, beyond that, I wanted to sort of get across a bit of the indestructible nature of Ramona's basic form. Um, and so I showed her, curled up and having survived. And honestly, she probably would have been able to stay inside of the Archine's gut for a good long while, and at least until she realized that she was still alive, and then probably would have been able to fight her way out. Oh, page 6. Goofball Ramona. That is a recurring theme. That is the the remnants of what little bit exists in me of any comedic sense, I feel like it does come out mostly in people's reactions to things. Um, I think it's just because that's something I like. I like reaction comedy versus, well, I like physical comedy too. Like I love a good pratfall, but um, um, but I like reaction. Like when people react to either an event that physically unfolds in front of them, or they're reacting to something that someone says. Again, close-ups and reactions. But Goofball Ramona, I wanted to get across that idea that she's a kid, for the most part, um, and so she's silly, even though she's out running around doing fairly serious things. She's still a little silly, but I don't have a whole lot to say about this page. I do love the poses, the ones where Ramona's sitting. It's a very relaxed sort of moment, sort of in the moment kind of thing. And I'm really, really happy with those illustrations and how they came out. I love natural posing of characters and just sort of capturing people mid-sentence versus just stiff characters where they're just standing around, gritting their teeth or occasionally their mouths just being open. Instead, I like to sort of capture them in the middle of in the middle of movement. So hand gestures definitely are a big thing with me. I speak with my hands, and so my characters tend to also speak with their hands. They do a lot of gesturing with their hands, and then I like relaxed poses. And so I'll try to incorporate relaxed poses in the body if I can, or just something that looks natural and not like stiff and I'm always ready for action, but sort of just kind of like standing around going, what? That kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe that's hard to understand when there's no real. Well, yeah, I guess that this whole page sort of does show that. You get a little bit of each of those, a little bit. Um, Anyways, so let's get into this sequence. So this sequence was really me not being able to let go of my old ways, but also trying to create and sort of, well, creatively engage and entertain you. The challenge was to take the limited space that I was working around and sort of work around it in different ways. And since it's a digital comic, I knew that it would display in a sort of frame by frame manner. And I thought it would be, I thought it told a funny little story about the nature of that portal, at least, as they went underground. I thought it would be kind of funny to show it going under sort of the page in a way. They're digging under. And but also it's sort of showing the nature of the gnomes as well. They're sort of, they're goofballs. Um, they're really clumsy and they're always sort of fighting with each other and um, but I'm not sure if the fact that the portal closing behind them really comes across visually. I don't know. Yes? No? Maybe? But that's what's happening. Ignore the fact that you don't see Effie anywhere in the scenes behind them. You just ignore that. He's there. You just don't see it because the gnomes don't see it. Yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. But I don't know. The gnomes are they're just dweebs. They're knuckleheads. I love them. They're like the perfect henchmen, honestly. So page 8. Speaking of which, this is another hint at the fact that the gnomes they're lackeys, they're henchmen, and not working alone. in, where is it? Well, one, he says he's got to call the boss, and then in this panel, they actually call their contact the professor. So there is that. Just a little bit of foreshadowing, playing with future elements that I know will eventually come up, depending on the choices that everyone reading makes when they vote. Um, oh, so we're at the end of this chapter, but I don't know. I really thought about Ramona being able to do a sort of omens, sort of sight beyond sight kind of thing, where she could see through Effie. You know, what he could see, she could see, and I thought about that, and I decided against it, really, because it would just be too easy to fall back on that. And I just went with him having to describe to her kind of what he was seeing, and it sort of leaves her in the dark a little. And I thought that would be a much better story driving um, plot piece. But I also wanted to slowly begin trickling out the idea that this necklace that she's wearing is somehow linked to Effie. It's more than just a necklace, and that they're able to communicate through it. Um, but we'll definitely get more into that in a few chapters. A little bit, a little bit more about the nature of the necklace. Um, but there's not there's not really a lot more to say about this. Gosh, other than because I'm tempted to start sort of tearing this page apart. There's some things on there visually that I don't like, and instead of doing that, I will end this commentary and leave on a fairly positive note. Um, and I guess I'll just say, oh gosh, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening, and thank you so very much for reading. Bye.